Welcome to Using Service as a Driver for customer loyalty, aftermarket add-on sales, and lifetime value generation. I'm glad you're here with us. I've got a goal for you. I'd like you to make more money. I'd like you to have less stress and more fun at work. And I'd like you to have more loyal customers that are a lot more easygoing and better to deal with. Sound good? Who in the world am I? My name is Valerie Ziebron, and that's me with my first car, my 1967 Dodge Corvette 440. That car took me through some college and high school shop classes, and when I graduated, I had my mechanic's license. Got a chance to work with Chrysler and General Motors, and I really needed some dealership experience. So I got the idea to work as a service writer. This was at a Chrysler Plymouth Dodge Suzuki dealership during what some of the older people in the audience might remember as the K-car era of Chrysler. Not necessarily our proudest product. I had people yelling at me from all day long the minute I got in there in the morning to the minute I left. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I had no idea at that point that it would really shape my career and give me an amazing opportunity to work with thousands of dealerships all across North America. So I was one of 3 service advisors. I like to say I was literally and figuratively in the middle. On one side of me was something we referred to as the revolving door position. We had a different service advisor in that slot every 2 to 6 weeks, and each one seemed to leave a path of destruction in their wake. On the other side of me is a guy that I refer to as Master Service Writer Dan Fujiwara. Dan knew how to write service, how to make friends while he was doing it, how to keep his techs happy, how to keep sales happy. I was getting a clinic, a front row seat to how the job could be done super well or really poorly. It was interesting watching people in the revolving door position because they would look over at Dan. And if you know that phrase, life can either make you better or bitter, a lot of them got bitter when they would see Dan. They'd say things like, he's got all the good customers sewn up, and they'd wind up leaving shortly thereafter. I decided to study the differences. What can you do at that position, at the service counter, at the parts counter, to make a difference in how customers and your internal team view you? So let's look at it this way. I know your shop is super unique, but what if we were to compare your store to other stores that are similar in size and scope? Could we find other shops that have the exact same amount of techs as your shop does? Could we find another shop that works on the same type of RVs and product mix that you have, deals with the same seasonality, etc.? If we were to compare your shop to those other shops, what would your financials look like? Would they be similar? Probably not. In fact, some stores are making hand over fist in the service departments, while others are actually losing money. You're working the same amount of hours, doing the same basic work, but some are far more effective at it as others. Similarly, when I was working that service counter, Dan was writing 2 or 3 times more work than the 2, myself and the other service writer combined. And yet, his customers were happier. His phone wasn't ringing off the hook with people looking for status updates. His tech seemed to be happier with him. He had a lot less heat cases. What was he doing differently? That's been my life study, and I'd boil it down to one word: proactive. Because let's face it, we're either being proactive or reactive in our jobs. So what areas of your shop overall, or your job specifically, could you be more proactive at? We're going to look at things like communication, documentation, and one of my favorites, I had one service writer and he showed me that he was wearing a Fitbit. He said, a lot of people wear these to track how many steps they have in a day, but my goal is to see how few steps I can walk. Because if I'm walking all around to the parts department on the lot, then I'm not really being efficient. I had another advisor and they said every time they touch a work order, they put a hash mark on it. And the goal was when they were closing out the ticket, how few times did I have to touch this ticket to be able to work it through the system with the fewest amount of touches as possible? So that's been my study, looking at what stores do and what individual service and parts advisors do to flip the switch from reactive to proactive. As you go through this program, I hope you kind of find some ways that you might be able to find extra minutes in your day by flipping that switch from reactive to proactive. It's a scary thought, but imagine that I was following you around with a video camera all day, and we sat down to review your tape. Would we find moments in your day that you were being a little reactive rather than proactive? Let's look for those things. But before we go there, I'd like you to just generically look at your shop under a microscope. This is something I like to do whenever I visit a new facility. Imagine that I'm looking at your dealership or your shop under a microscope, and there's 3 possible petri dishes that we're probably going to see. Here's the first one. You got a bunch of employees, and they're going after different goals. Maybe all these goals are good goals. You want high customer service. The other group wants really high profitability. Those are all great goals. But if we're not going in the same direction, a year from now, where's this shop going to be? And even if all these workers are working really hard, how effective are we going to be? This is a pretty frustrating environment to be in. Believe it or not, this is not the worst petri dish. Sometimes when I visit a shop or a dealership, I see this. Yuck. You're actually fighting with each other or creating conflict. Does your dealership have too much drama? Is it a little bit like a soap opera? Days of our dealership as the wheel turns. Not a good scenario. So the third petri dish, this is what we want your store and your shop to look like. One goal, clearly communicated. Everyone understands what their role is, and they also understand what their coworkers' roles are. So important, because if one of those employees isn't there for one reason or another, everybody else is able to sort of pick up the slack and keep the ball moving in the same direction. You can actually do a lot more with a lot less if we're looking at this last petri dish. So that's my goal for you. But what does this take? And specifically, what's your role in it? Well, let's start with the relationship between sales and service. I love this cartoon. Sales and service is in the same boat, but sales is pointing at the service guy saying, "Oh my gosh, your side of the boat is sinking." Let's face it, we're all in this together, and hopefully we keep the boat afloat and moving in the right direction rather than sinking. I want to take a second to just talk about the differences between sales and service. Have you ever kind of looked at the type of people that gravitate towards working in sales versus the type of people that gravitate towards working in the service and parts departments? I always thought there was a little bit of a difference, but I never was able to prove it until I was working at a hotel for 4 days in a row as teaching a conference, and the first 2 days was just for salespeople. The last 2 days were just for service and parts workers. I said I might never get a chance to do this again, so let me do a little experiment. Here's what I did. I asked everyone right after break, "Everyone, could you please move all the tables and chairs to the back of the room?" When I said that in the sales room, what happened? There was a lot of discussion, there wasn't a lot of movement, and 2 days in a row, someone said to me, "Well, maybe we could call someone from banquets and get them to do it." Can you imagine what happened when I gave those exact same instructions to the service and parts rooms? Everyone got up immediately. There wasn't much discussion. In fact, the only talking I heard was people saying, "Hey, you grab the workbooks, I'll get the..." It's more directional to get it done quickly. For a minute, I stood there being so proud and pleased that I was a service worker, thought, "Yep, that's my people, we get her done." And then I thought about it, man, does that ever get us in trouble? That we're so quick to jump in and take action that we miss out on some of the communication that the sales team is so good at. We'll talk about that in later segments, but let's suffice it to say that there are indeed differences between the type of people who work in sales and the type of people who work in service and parts. We're geared to get her done, and that's great. That helps us run an efficient shop. It's also great that we can fix more than RVs. If we utilize the people in the shop, we can fix processes, profitability, customer retention, seasonal and logistical challenges. It's so great to be able to utilize the entire thinking of the entire team to come up with solutions that will benefit the entire dealership. Another thing to know about us in service and parts is that actions tend to mean a lot more than words to us. So because of that, communication and empathy might not be our strong points, but they're important to some of the other people in the dealership. Here's what one of my master techs said to me about it. He said, if any of the techs mention something that's hurting the business, we're told to quit our whining, but then we're the ones to catch hell when the numbers suffer. True. Here's what one of my master advisors said about this. It's so important to have good relationships with your techs. Sometimes I have to let them vent, and other times I need to buffer them from customer or sales comments that could be taken wrong. He's on to something. It reminds me when my husband and I were just getting married. My husband asked his, I guess he was my fiance at that point, asked his dad for any marriage advice. And I love it. His dad said to him, son, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Those of us working in the service and parts counters often have that choice. Do we want to be right or do we want to be happy? And your role is so often to be that buffer between your technicians and some of the stuff that's coming at us at the service and parts counters. Recently, I had an opportunity to interview a lot of our customers as well as top employees from dealerships. And I was interviewing top salespeople one day, and I asked them, what do you attribute your success in sales to? I was really surprised by one of the salespeople's answers. I actually thought he misunderstood the question. Here's what he said. He said, certainly having first-class RVs helps, but without a great service crew, sales is just lip service. It's so great to have a service team that stands by their work. I was so happy to hear a salesperson say that about his crew. Love that. It reminded me of a time that I was having a similar interview at a dealership with a master tech. And we were sitting in a coach, and the tech interrupted me. He said, hey, hang on one second. He said, you see that guy right there? There's someone walking past on the lot. He said, that's our top sales guy. He puts food on my family's table. And he mentioned that when he sits down at the dinner table, he thinks and thanks God for all the people in his dealership that make the whole business a success. And right here on this screen, this is what we need to see more of. In order for us all to have a better working environment, to have happier customers and better loyalty, it really starts from within. There's a lot of statistics that back up the importance of the relationship between sales and service. I'm going to show you just a couple. There's the 60-30-10 that came from us by Polk Industry. It says 60% of the dealership's business is coming from repeat customers. That makes sense. 30% of our business is coming from referrals, people that those current customers are telling to come to us. So that leaves a mere 10% coming from our ads, our walk-ins, RV shows that we're doing. So we're looking here at, this question, 90% of the business that we're generating on an annual basis is coming from our existing customers. It's critical that we cultivate and take care of these people really well. Another study that I looked at put it this way. It said on average, 86% of customers purchase new units from dealerships that they visit for service work 2 or more times per year. So if we can get them loyal to our shop, they're far more likely to purchase the next unit. I'm probably preaching to the choir. This is all stuff you guys know. And internally, what it winds up looking like is we say, I'm your best customer, gosh darn it. And they say back to us, we're your best customer. Don't you forget it. And if we're not careful, we end up with that middle petri dish, which is no good for anybody. I'd like you to think of it this way. Is there a Great Wall of China that exists between your sales and your service department, or your lot and your shop, or even service and parts? Every single day in the way that we interact with our coworkers, we're either putting a brick in the wall or we're taking a brick out. One of my husband's favorite phrases is stop pointing the finger and start pointing the thumb. And I think we're going to find throughout this course that you're going to have a lot of that. There's all kinds of ways that you could point at your coworkers or other things. Yeah, just focus on yourself a little bit here. What are you doing that's helping your relationships with your coworkers? What can you do to remove some of those bricks and get a better relationship going? Because when you look at it, we all want customer satisfaction, but it starts with employee satisfaction. Without ESI, employee satisfaction, you can't have customer satisfaction. And similarly, a lot of us say a lot about having better customer communication. But without better internal communication, we're kind of blowing smoke at the customer. If I don't have a clear picture of genuinely what's going on internally at the dealership, how do I even know what to say to the customer? This leads to the number one shop complaint. Test question, excuse me. The number one shop complaint is lack of communication. What kills me about this is there is so much in the shop that's outside of our control. We can't always control if the part's going to be there, if the tech is able to work on it, if the weather's good. There's so much we can't control, but communication is within our control. So make sure that we're doing a good job, and this program is going to give you a lot of tools for that. We're going to do a lot to talk about what we can do to be better in the customers' ratings, but I wanted to take a quick look at rating our customers. Is there anyone, when you see them come in, you think, oh Lord, let someone else help them? If we were to rate our customers and put some on the great end of the scale and some on the other, what would that look like? On one end of the scale are the great customers. I toss you the keys, I say whatever it needs. Maybe they even bring you gifts. They wouldn't dream of going anywhere else, and they even refer additional business to you. So if that's on the good end of the scale, what's on the not so good end? I think you're out to get me. I have to be a squeaky wheel to get anything done. Dealing with service is the worst. Throughout your time working service and parts, you're going to have customers moving up and down this scale. And it's a conscious decision that we make in every interaction, every single time, to try to move people further to that good side of the customer scale. And you can have someone who's way over on that great side of the scale, and one bit of misinformation or perceived issue that they have, and boom, they can slide, whop, 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 all the way to that bad end. So it's a constant push to make sure that we're moving people over to the left-hand side of the scale. Now I show you this to say somewhere in the middle of this scale is the satisfied customer. And it's not the ideal, but we have to understand where in the customer spectrum we start to be able to build on that and create loyalty. What does it mean for them in service and parts specifically to be satisfied with their shop? This is a great study that broke down not only what the elements are from the customer's standpoint, but also how important they are. So we're going to look at these individually. There's a place for you to take notes in your handout, so hopefully you can do that. And I'd like you to think about each of these and say, what role do you play in doing a good job with this? So here's the first one. It's tangibles. It's your actual facility, the equipment, parking, accessibility. It can include things like location, which may not have obviously anything you can control, or the size of your shop, or the skill level of your technicians. But there's also things, intangibles, that are very much in your control. Here's what one of our customers said about it. This is an expensive RV. If your desk or the paperwork is a mess, I'm seriously going to question doing business with you. He's got a good point. You know, we always say that the way a technician keeps tools says a lot about them. But similarly, the way service and parts workers keep their desk area, their workspace, says a lot about us as well. The next area is reliability. Performing the promised service dependably and accurately. And in our industry, that's often known as fixed first visit. Do you have any role in that? I certainly hope so. Whether you're in service or parts, decisions and things that you do every day strongly impact the reliability. The next, here's what one of our customers said about it. They said they gave me a check sheet that goes over everything and lets me know what's going to need attention and when. This is such a powerful tool. There's something known as the 80-20 visual principle. Test question. And it's basically saying that people believe only 20% of what we say to them, what we tell them. but they believe 80% of what we show them. So please remember to use visuals as much as possible, especially when they're coming into us at the service and parts desk. Being able to show them the schematic on the computer if we're looking it up in parts, or to actually be at their RV with them to look at it. Even showing them pictures on your phone or computers or some broken down parts to explain. Those visuals are so critically important, and we have so many opportunities in the shop to show instead of just tell. The next area is responsiveness. Prompt, helpful, willing. When the phone rings, are we picking it up? If you're with someone else and someone comes in the department, are we at least giving them a, hey, I see you, heads up, I'll be with you when I can? Responsiveness. Clearly, we've got some areas that we can work on in that. Specifically, do you remember what I said the number one customer complaint about service and parts was? Exactly, communication. And there's a statistic that I've always said, when this one goes away, I'll be able to retire. So please help me out here. I want to retire someday. 90% of the phone call volume coming into most service and parts departments are coming from about 10% of your customers. Is that incredible? 10% of your customers are feeling the need to pick up the phone and call and check on us. And a lot of times this is with completely reactive types questions. So did he figure anything out yet? Am I going to have it by the weekend? Did the part come in yet? Oh, don't let that be you. Make sure that you are doing things to be proactive in your communication. Setting callback times with your customers, contacting the customer with their preferred method, being professional with your communication skills, and just bottom line, getting in front of it. Master Dan had a little saying, he took it from Dr. Pepper, the soda. He said, Dr. Pepper had an ad campaign called Drink Dr. Pepper at 10, 2, and 4. He said, I try and make those customer callbacks at 10, at 2, and at 4. And maybe he didn't get it right on the dot, but it was just an internal clock for him to remember. He also did something else that I've noticed other master service and parts advisors do. They set that callback time. When they're with the customer, they say, hey, you're going to hear from me no later than, and tell them when that's going to be, 1 p.m. Wednesday, or that Wednesday afternoon, you're going to hear from me. In the nicest possible way, you're pretty much saying to your customers, don't call me, I'm going to call you. You might not get 100% of them trained, but you can get a good chunk of your customers to expect a phone call from you and not call you. Here's what one of our service writers said about it. He said, we're using texts more with our customers, and it has been fantastic. I can contact all my customers quickly with pre-written messages that I just copy and paste. It has seriously cut my time on the phone down to 1/10 of what it was, and it's raised our CSI and our online reviews. I've heard so many stories like this where people are either just using their individual phones for texting, or they're using companies like Connect to use a texting service with the dealership. Either way, texts can be a fantastic thing. Emails as well. It's not necessarily always on the phone, but find out what's the preferred method to the customer and stay in touch with them. The next is assurance. Knowledge, courtesy, and conveying trust. Can I trust you with my baby? There's a big chunk of a person's ego that's tied to their recreational vehicle, so they need to be sure that their baby is in good hands. Here's what one of our advisors said. They said, we send pictures and video back and forth with our customers. It gives us better information, and it gives them a better understanding of what we're doing that they're paying for. Absolutely. This goes back to that 80-20 visual principle. The more we can show them, hey customer, we got into it and here's some corrosion that we found. It's going to take us a little more time. When they see it on their unit, a picture or a video, or on the other side of it, nothing's more frustrated than an intermittent problem. But if we can get the customer to capture that intermittent problem acting up on video, wow, that saves our technician all kinds of time. The last one is empathy. Caring, individualized attention. And I gotta tell you, this is not a strong point for me. And I've noticed that a lot of service and parts workers have a challenge when it comes to empathy. Here's how our customers put it. You can tell they genuinely care. And it's not that I don't think we do care, but I've always sort of been, I fixed it. Why should I have to have a sad, sappy moment with you about it too? At the end of the day, though, you got to ask yourself, do we fix people or do we fix RVs? And we really fix both. And it's more important for us to fix that customer first, or else no matter what we do on the RV, they're not going to be happy with it. So the study breaks down the 5 areas, but they're not all created equal. So we're going to look at how important each of these are. Tangibles, the building, the facility, all of that, it's 19% of their CSI overall in service. So it's important. Keeping our area clean is key, but it's not the end-all be-all. Reliability, on the other hand, is the single most important factor, clocking in at 44%. Making sure that we fix their units right the first time is the #1 reason that they're coming to us and paying good money. Now these last 3 things, responsiveness, assurance, and empathy, I'll show you the how they ranked individually. But if you look at them, they're really all behaviors that they're receiving from their frontline person. So we're going to look at that lumped as well. So behaviors total is coming up at 37%. Individually, responsiveness 10, assurance 16, and empathy 11%. Bottom line is, you have a role in each one of these, some a little more than others, and your role is incredibly important. When a customer is not satisfied with service, it's often something we're doing. It's the people. It's rarely that, oh, it was a part issue or something. It's something that people working the service and parts department are doing or not doing that's causing that. But we've got a lot on our plates. When you look at the tasks and the job descriptions of service advisors, some of the key pillars, and man, I could have put more on here, but I wanted to fit it all on one slide. Over the ownership cycle of them owning their RV, you're going to spend more time with that customer than anyone else in the dealership. It's very much up to those of us working the front line to build customer satisfaction and loyalty because we have that much time with them. It's also up to us to make sure that that RV is safe and reliable. It's up to us to educate the customers, often when the fun of the purchase is worn off. As a matter of fact, there was a study that said if customers learn from us, if we do a good job educating them in service and parts, they like us and trust us better. So use that one. We also keep the techs turning wrenches, and the minute they stop turning wrenches, the whole business stops making money. We generate work orders and parts orders, and we use that so flippantly. Oh, we're going to generate an RO. That's a legal contract. So every time we're generating a ticket, there's a lot that really needs to go in that to make sure that we do it well. We communicate, hopefully clearly, internally, so we get that internal communication, and with our customers. Our jobs, like it or not, are sales jobs. We have to document everything, follow up proactively, track workflow progress and quality control. And add to that, we see the customer when a lot of times they're not so happy or frustrated. And lastly, we strongly influence the next purchase decision. There's a lot riding on our positions. It is all up to you. No pressure or anything. I love this cartoon. Mama Lump of Coal is saying to Baby Lump of Coal, your dad's been under a lot of pressure lately. One of my favorite phrases is that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And after having worked in the service and parts department for going on 30 years now, one of the things I love about working in shops is those of you working the front line in service and parts that have really excelled at your job, you become a diamond. You become what I call a master service advisor, a master parts advisor, able to not only do your job well, but able to choose the high road. That do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? There's going to be plenty of times you're right, but you choose happy. So what does it take for a customer or your coworkers to be loyal? What makes you loyal to a business? You're going to know a girl wrote this because we're going to talk about love. You may not always like your customers or your coworkers, but in order to fix things right the first time and build loyalty in the service and parts department, we have to love each other. What in the world do I mean by this? LOVE is an acronym for listening intently, making sure we're really genuinely hearing what they say, understanding what it is they're telling us. And understanding can also be another word for empathy. It's not always about understanding so we can fix it. Sometimes it's understanding so we can just empathize with them. And lastly, verify. Verify that we've got the right information, that we have what we need for the tech to fix it right the first time, and that the customer is going to be pleased with the result. When we listen, understand, and verify with our employees, it leads to better customer satisfaction. Similarly, when we listen, understand, and verify and use those communication skills internally, it's going to manifest itself in better jobs externally with our customers. But let's get back to the real world.
Oh, I'm not sure what their schedule is. Go ahead and bring it in anytime. Service guys will squeeze you in.
Say what? Hopefully that doesn't happen in your store. But whether it's sales or parts or whoever else, squeezing things in does not lead to happy customers. One of the best practices that I've seen done is to actually give sales a block of service time for them to manage and schedule themselves. Anytime we squeeze someone in, we wind up having to squeeze someone else out. So the more we can make our time visible and visual, something that we can all see, the better it's going to go. I've got a few more best practices on this. Here's what one dealership said. He said, "We ensure that there are no surprises when we deliver a new RV. The salesperson creates a packet and a copy goes to each department. We have a check sheet to make sure everything is ordered and done properly with enough time allowed. It's very organized and prevents a lot of headaches." That's a fantastic best practice. The next dealer said, "We found that the more an RV is customized to the owners, the happier they are with it. Their pride of ownership goes up the more we can make it truly theirs." And here's a fill in the blank in your book. That's both a sales and a loyalty building opportunity for us. This is a picture of my fine camping getup here and my dog Dagny. But this quote is so true. When we bought our RV, that was just the beginning. Man, within the first 60 days of owning it, we were buying generators, we were buying camping equipment, and I really wish we would have had the opportunity to have bought it from the dealership, but we didn't. There wasn't much there. No one suggested anything to us. So the more we customize it, the more it's going to be their product. When I was doing the phone calls where I was having the opportunity to interview a lot of our our customers, I heard some great stories, and I asked for them. I said, "Can you give me any examples of dealerships that have gone above and beyond, who have really, really impressed you?" And two stories in particular I wanted to share with you. One was and I had repeatedly heard about one specific technician, and the customers were like, "Oh my gosh, my tech rocks, he's amazing." And another store that every customer that I spoke with just loved the people. They said, "I love those folks at the dealership. I'd do anything to help them out." So I dug a little bit deeper and said, what is it specifically in these two examples that these customers genuinely liked? So let's look at it. Here's what they said about the tech that rocks. "He finds things before they ruin our vacation. He lets me know what to keep an eye on, things that maybe don't need work on right now, but to keep an eye on. I've learned some really useful things I didn't know." So back to that educating them, showing them things, and training them on some things. "He actually called me." What a concept. This shop gets so many requests for this one technician, they actually had to change their scheduling to accommodate the demand. But when you look at these key elements of what the customers liked about it, is this tech doing anything that other techs, or even advisors for that matter, can't do? These are really tenets of what we should all be doing. Similarly, when I looked into the customers who just were loving the folks at the dealership and said, "What is it about the dealership you love?" Here's what they told me. "When they tell me something, you can trust it." As a matter of fact, every customer I spoke with from this dealership used the word trust. They point out things that are interesting to me. They get what kind of RVing we do. So connecting with them about their kids, their dogs, how they're using their equipment. They keep me in the loop, even when there's no information. Are you comfortable making that phone call to say, hey, I just haven't forgotten about you. I want to let you know you're still on our radar. They want me to leave happy. They really have their act together. Service, sales, and parts are all on the same page, and you can tell that they genuinely care. How can you come across as a caring service professional? I've got a handful of fill-in-the-blanks in your book. The first is ask about them, and look for clues in clothes they're wearing, stickers that are on their RV, equipment that you see in there. Strike up conversations and find some common ground. Listen more than you talk. Use that 2-ear, 1-mouth ratio. Put the focus on the customer's needs. Sometimes we feel like we're empathizing with the customer, but we're actually more or less empathizing with ourselves. Oh, customer, I'm so sorry your special order part didn't show up. That's not really what they're caring about. They're caring about not being able to go camping this weekend. Lastly, be considerate and human. What do I mean by that? There's something I refer to as the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. And you've probably seen this. You ever gone into a business and there's employees in there and they're laughing and cutting it up with each other, and then they turn to you, the customer, and suddenly have no personality? Yeah. Or maybe it's vice versa. They're so nice to the customer, and then when a coworker comes to ask them something, they rip their head off. What do you want? Oh my gosh. Yikes. That's not human. That's weird. So I'd like you to listen to a couple quotes. How would this make you feel? And I hate to say it, but these are actual quotes that we've heard at the service and parts counter. And I'm the first to say, I've often said things and you're like, oh my gosh, that probably got taken the wrong way. So I'm not picking on anybody here, but how could we say these things better? So here's each quote. Well, go ahead and buy it online, but good luck getting them to stand behind it when it doesn't work out. Yeah, thanks, buddy. Not really liking and trusting you with this one. But how would a master advisor say it? You know, there definitely are some good-looking deals online. Just something to be aware of. We've had a couple customers really get burnt. So let me tell you how to know if you're getting an apples-to-apples comparison and some really good questions to ask. Looking like you're in their best interest, if you let them know and educate them in a good way, chances are they're going to like you. You're saying kind of the same thing, but in a much, much different way. Check out the next one. You're going to do it yourself. Good luck with that. Ouch. I actually heard one guy say, well, when you bring it to us in a box, it might take us longer and be more expensive. Yikes. I love how I heard one master advisor handle it. He says, oh, you can work on it yourself? Man, that is so great. We ever consider working as a technician? Because we can't get techs in here. We would love to talk with you if that's something you'd ever want to do full time. I don't know how your shop's going, but most of our stores could use an extra tech or two. Bottom line here, if someone's going to fix it themselves, they probably have a bit of an ego. Most techs I know do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but never insult a guy or his toolbox, or a girl for that matter, in her toolbox. Build it up. I saw one master advisor handle this so well. They said, oh, that's so great, you can work on it. You know, I've got a full parts request list here. Nothing worse than you're halfway through the project on Sunday and whoops, you need the gasket and we're not open, or you have to drive a long way to get here. At least get the parts sale out of it. Chances are pretty good if you talk to the customer and you stroke their ego and you talk about the repair, they might actually say, you know what, it sounds like too much hassle. I'm just going to have you guys work on it. Keep in mind not just what you say, but how you say it. We've all heard the phrase, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, but sometimes it is what you say. My parents were both English teachers, and they loved teaching me enormous words when I was a little kid. For example, does anybody know what the largest word in the dictionary is? Imagine Valerie at, I think probably first or second grade, being able to say pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. It's a lung disease caused by the inhalation of volcanic ash. I came home from school one day, and at the dinner table, my parents said, "How was school?" Because I seemed kind of out of sorts. And I said, no one understands me. I said, I don't care about big words anymore. I want to be able to communicate with people. I'll never forget my dad took me on his lap and gave me a big hug, and he said, "Kidling," that's what he used to call me, "Kidling, that's pretty wise. Communication is more important than big words." And I think there's something to be said for that in our profession. Speak in language that the customer understands or that sales understands. There's no help in putting someone down or making them feel stupid by using language they don't get. What does KISS stand for? Keep it simple, service specialists. So one of the areas that gets us in a lot of trouble with this is acronyms. It's not just the technical talk, but using acronyms, even some little common ones that we use in the shop, can get us into some trouble. People don't know what they mean, and it really alienates them. So try to avoid those. If you focus on how you make people feel, everything goes so much smoother. That's such a great phrase to keep in mind. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Because things are going to go wrong. Hopefully not this wrong. But when things go wrong, there can be an incredible ray of sunshine in that cloudy sky. Because when you handle customers' problems well, their loyalty and repurchase intentions can be even higher than customers who never had a problem. So we're going to talk about that in a future online seminar of what you can do when it goes bad and how you can win people over. But it's not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, when we ask customers which dealerships they were loyal to or which brands they were loyal to, about 70% of them brought up a dealership or a brand that they had initially had an issue with. But they were so impressed with how well they took care of the issue, that's what cultivated that loyalty. Understanding creates that loyalty. And remember, the other word for that is empathy. It's not just fixing the RV, it's fixing the customer and how they feel about it. Remember this one? I love those folks at the dealership. I'd do anything to help them out. When I was interviewing our more high-end customers, I asked them specifically if they would take the time to fill out a survey. Is there anything that we could do at the dealership level to get you to fill out a survey? And I was surprised. I thought most of them would say, no, I don't have time for that. Most of them actually said they would if two things were done. Test question. They said they'd fill out a survey if A, they like you, and B, you ask. One guy actually said, I would have filled it out if he'd asked, but he didn't. Ouch. Another guy actually said, they did ask, and they sort of stroked my ego. They said, Doug, not a lot of people can afford a nice coach like yours. I don't get a lot of surveys on this. It would really mean a lot for me if you'd take the time to fill it out. He said, I was happy to do it. So if you know you have a happy customer, make sure they know, hey, that survey that comes in the mail or that you get on an email, that's my personal report card. I'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out. But once again, things are going to go wrong. That's also not a bad thing internally because we can learn from our mistakes and get better. Speaking of better, if you had to pick a left side of the screen or right side of the screen, what's better? A mass market pizza or a real pizzeria? A mass market sandwich or a real Philly cheesesteak? I'm probably guessing you're going to go with the real deal. But which is more profitable? Now we might get into, they've got national advertising or blah, blah, blah. But even if you look at a store-by-store basis, the profitability of a Subway or a franchise over some of the ma and pa varieties is usually so much stronger. Why? They're certainly not providing a better end product. Why are they more profitable? It all boils down to the process. I've got a Subway sandwich shop in my neighborhood, and sometimes there's only one person working there, but that sandwich gets made exactly the same way. It's consistent time and time again. Similarly, in our shops, Shops that have processes have better end results, and there's a lot less finger pointing or looking at who did what wrong. Instead, we're able to look at the process and figure out what went wrong, how we can do it better. The service process is pretty straightforward, whether you're a tiny shop with one technician who also writes tickets, or whether you're an enormous conglomerate with multiple dealerships. We're still doing scheduling and communication, write-up and dispatch, repair and parts procurement, hopefully some quality control, delivery, and some follow-up. And if you look and analyze how each of these steps are being done in your store, you write them down and share that with everybody, you're going to get better results. Looking at the process map, it's also important to kind of view it a little bit like a relay race. And other than the finish line, that handoff is so critically important. That's a place where possibly the baton could drop. But what if instead of the baton dropping, instead we looked at each one of those in-between steps as a quality control checkpoint? So for example, when the technician receives a work order, what if he looks it over and says, is there everything on here I need? Is there enough time allocated? When someone brings the parts request list to the parts counter, that's another possible quality control checkpoint. Instead of the baton dropping, do we have everything we need? Multiple eyes on some of these common areas where the profit ball drops are some of the areas where we can really shore up the processes and make it better for everybody involved. There's a handful of reasons why I like doing process maps and why I've seen it really work for stores. Test question, and these are really key to write down in your handout there. A written process will provide consistency. It gets us more of the same result time and again. It increases our efficiency, which is the name of the game in service, selling that time and getting as much done as possible in a short period of time. It lets you do more with less. More work with less people. I'd rather have a solid process and less people than a lot of people and no process. It allows for continuous improvement. When everyone sees and is involved with the written process map, they can all point out things that might be able to make it better. It certainly brings new hires up to speed quickly. If they're able to see this is how it's all supposed to go, I get it, I understand the overall mission, and we get that end petri dish that we want. One goal clearly communicated, everybody pointing in the same direction. It also creates accountability. If something isn't happening, we're able to look at it and say, okay, why isn't this happening? What do we need to make sure it's happening? And lastly, it really helps us pinpoint those fixed first visit issues. If something isn't going well, we can look at it and figure out why. So let's see how your shop stacks up. We're going to go through this pretty quick, but I'd love you to put a plus or a star next to the areas that are strengths for your shop, and maybe a minus or something else on the areas that are opportunities for you. Scheduling and communication. Make a positive first impression on the phone or in person. Put yourself in the customer's shoes and convey empathy. Make sure that if we prioritize, if we're going to stick someone above someone else, that it's fair. One of the best ways to make it fair is to show them a visual schedule. Let me see when the technician that we're needed for that is going to be available. Make it visual. Whenever possible, pre-write the repair order and run and attach the history to it. Agree dealership-wide on who can and who can't schedule service work. Use a visual scheduling system that everyone can see, including sales. Know what your shop and your storage capacity is. Don't have people bring in the RVs if we're running close on space, or else we're just going to have more lot damage. This next one's tough because a lot of times customers try to get us to promise, but never promise anything that's outside of your control. Never diagnose over the phone or email or text. That can get us in all kinds of trouble. Return messages promptly and allow extra time for emergencies and sales. I should say that each store is going to be a little bit different, but these are some of the generic things that might come up over scheduling and communication. When you see this cartoon, this is a recent add-on of a best practice that a dealership has given us. This one said, we have the customer email us a list of what they think is wrong and what they want worked on before they even show up for their appointment, having that email ahead of time really helps. I bet it does. The next one is write-up. Get as much good information as possible from the customer. What, when, where, how. Perform walkarounds for the two main reasons of looking for upsell and liability. If it is a comeback, note fix first visit on the repair order, the schedule, and some places even put a tag on the RV or use a different color so that they know this thing's back in for a second visit. Document the best way to reach the customer. So what's the absolute best way to reach you? And I promise you're going to hear from me no later than. Set that hereby time. Get approval for the estimate or set a pre-approval amount, especially with customers that we already have a relationship with. Do you want us just to say if we can get it done for less than X amount? We'll go ahead and do it. Take the time to do a proper write-up. Sometimes we rush through it, and a few extra minutes at the write-up can save us hours or even days down the road, so it is time well spent. One of my favorite best practices, a real simple one, whatever the customer's primary concern is, put that on line 1 of the work order. That way everybody knows what the most important thing is to that customer. That lets us know what to diagnose first, what to mention when we're talking to the customer when they call or when we're calling them. Verify all customer and all RV information. Don't just take the customer's word for it. Make sure you're looking and seeing what the VIN number is. Suggest additional work, accessories, other things that they might need or that might make their ownership experience better. And educate the customer using language they understand, using those visuals as much as possible. When you're face-to-face with the customer, this is a great time to really work on cultivating a trusting relationship with them. And lastly, not always easy with an RV, but have the customer remove valuables, especially things like jewelry, guns, etc. We're sharing pictures and video back and forth with our customers. The techs can see and hear exactly what the issue is, and the customer really appreciates the explanation. Such a great new technology that we're using more and more in the service department. Now before we get into repair, I want you to look, scheduling and write-up. Those two are what we call the foundation of the process. Without a great job of scheduling and write-up, we are sending the technician up the creek without a paddle. So make sure that those first two are done right and done well. Now it's up to the tech. Get the right tech on the job. Be prepared for tomorrow. Make sure we're allowing enough time to do the work. Do a proper diagnostic. Utilize special tools, manuals, and bulletins. And throughout the process, keep the customer informed. As we're adding additional work, get authorization and document it. Make sure that we've got all the parts, the repair orders, and the RVs staged as proactively as possible so we're not wasting time looking for it. Dispatch properly, and part of that is making sure that we spread the gravy work fairly. If we're not careful, sometimes your best technician is only getting the hardest jobs, and especially if we're paying them based on their efficiency, they could actually get hurt. Communicate any issues, delays, or upsell, and document carefully the cause of the customer's concern and what correction is needed and taken. Make sure, don't wait till the end, make sure that all parts and labor are being captured on the repair order. And lastly, look over the RV for any additional issues that are either needed now or that could be coming up in the future. Some of our stores are going to mobile apps so the guys can enter things right away in the field. Love the way this is heading. Now we're into quality control. In a perfect world, we would say that everyone is responsible for quality control, but when you say it's everyone's job, nobody does it. So the first QC person is the tech who worked on it. It sounds obvious, but make sure that the fix we did actually takes care of that customer's initial complaint. That's one of the leading causes of comebacks. You did a fine repair on that rattle, just the wrong rattle. Every RV should be QC'd. Make sure there's no gifts with purchase. Remove all rags, tools, boxes, packaging material, etc. Complete a multi-point inspection report. In addition to the RV being quality checked, every work order should be quality checked. Make sure that the RV is clean, at least as clean as when it came in, hopefully a little bit better. Perform what's called an active delivery on the phone, email, or text where we're going everything. Be prepared to answer questions. Give them the total that they'll be responsible for down to the penny. Schedule the pickup and the courtesy wash, and with the customer to make sure that we're avoiding a dirty RV or storage fees. And lastly, sounds obvious, but don't forget to collect the money. Give the customer a heads up on future work needed, and if you can use that multi-point inspection form that's completed as a visual, even better. Schedule the future work or add it to what I like to call a rainy day list. That's something that's going to capture work that needs to be done in the future but maybe isn't necessary right now. We'll talk about that more later. Have a dedicated area at delivery where the paperwork, the keys, everything's going to be so that we're not searching for it when the customer comes. Thank the customer, and lastly, track results with surveys. Sounds like a lot of work. When you look through the process map, and that's a pretty simple one, we just sort of did the high-level things, it's a lot. I like when salespeople sit in on process mapping for service and parts because usually about halfway through their jaw drops. They say, wow, it's kind of a lot. Everything's got to come together to get something fixed right the first time in. So let's look at ways to make it easier. One of the biggest ones is look at it this way. Every time we generate a repair order, it's costing us. It's costing us time, effort, money. So I'm going to give you a choice. You can either write 2 ROs for that customer, or you can write 5 ROs for that customer for the same amount of labor and parts. What's better for you and the customer? Sure. Let's look at it this way. What if you could do the same amount of labor this next year as you did last year, but you did it on 20% less tickets? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that let you breathe a little bit better? But in order to do that, we have to catch things every time we're working on the unit. We can't just rush to close out the ticket and get on to the next one. When you're looking at it on a screen or in a class, it seems pretty obvious that the choice on the left, 2, is a whole lot better than 5. Unfortunately, in the real world, a lot of shops are choosing option 5. If you remember that very first graphic I showed you where I want you to make more money, have less stress, have more fun at work, more loyal customers, this image right here is a big reason why some of our stores are making money and some of our stores are losing money. Why some service and parts advisors are running around like chickens with their heads cut off and others seem to actually be having a pretty good time at work. So slow yourself down to hurry up. Make sure that when you have the opportunity, you're working smarter. But what does it mean to work smarter? Well, a big part of it is making sure we're not leaking profitability, and that leak of profitability can be efficiency, time, parts, all kinds of things. I was visiting one store and they had all these little profit leaks, and I started looking around and I said, man, it's like this dealer is SpongeBob SquarePants. He just keeps soaking up all of these little leaks of profitability, and he referred to them as the cost of doing business. He just said, it's just the cost of doing business. Oh my gosh, it made me crazy. There was a part of his area in the parts department, I described it as where old parts go to die. There's just this, like, it was almost as if someone's junk drawer had exploded into a junk room. He had this mentality of, well, maybe someday I'll need that. Oh my gosh. While we were walking around the dealership, someone from parts came up to me and said, or came up to him and said, hey boss, there's someone at my parts counter who had purchased a unit last week. They said that their sales guy had promised them all kinds of stuff in the deal. The dealer said, well, just give them what they want. That's the cost of doing business. What? I started looking at this dealer that was reminding me of SpongeBob SquarePants, and I just wanted to wring him out. I thought, man, all the profits of your business are being soaked up time and again. You ever heard that phrase, first time you're bad, second time my bad? We should be learning. If there's a profit leak that's going on, we need to fix it. It's so bad in this one store, it actually woke me up at 3 in the morning, and I wrote a music video. Check it out.
dealer was a sponge, E-I-E-I-O, with a lot cost here and a shop cost there. Special freight that I ate everywhere it cost. Old Mick dealer was a sponge, E-I-E-I-O.
Well, you know how sick and wrong I really am. Where is your shop leaking profitability? Are you paying for special freight when it isn't being billed to the customer? Do we have leaks of profitability in how we're dealing with parts or other areas? Here's one. What if I could magically tell you how much money your parts department lost last year? Hopefully it's low, but in a lot of stores it's incredibly high. What would that number look like for your store? This slide shows some of the most common profit leaks out there, but it's not inclusive. There's others besides this, but these are some of the big ones. Unsecured parts area, parts not billed properly, lost sales due to parts not available, no WEOs in sales, so we're not writing down exactly what's included in the deal, not taking advantage of ordering discounts, shipping and special freight that either isn't billed to the customer or isn't necessary, inefficient and untrained staff, not processing warranty parts properly, no regular bin checks or inventory, mispriced parts or obsolescent, not understanding your dealer management software, improper parts check-in, pulling parts reactively, giving them away, theft, and the list goes on and on and on. If any of these are an issue in your dealership, it really can add up quickly. Another enormous profit leak are things that keep techs from turning wrenches. I went into a handful of stores that this worked well in because they had an enclosed shop, and I put up a camera. So let's see what's keeping techs from turning wrenches. So at the end of the day, we'd review the camera on fast forward, fast rewind to see where do they go. Here's what we found. Waiting on dispatch, waiting on parts, waiting on approval, locating units, moving units, and then I lumped together kind of this cell phone, excessive brakes, smoke breaks, whatever. An interesting thing happened when I got a call from a dealer up north who said, my techs won't work overtime and it's making me nuts because we're a really seasonal dealership and we need them to work overtime. I said, can I do a survey, just an employee survey with your team? Interesting what wound up coming out of that survey, because the techs said that when they showed up to work, the service writer and service manager weren't ready for them. So they said even when we show up on time, we have to stand around and wait for them to get their act together, so the first 2 hours of each day is kind of a mess. I looked back at some of my other stores I'd worked in and said, wow, the more that the techs can point to efficiency issues with waiting on dispatch, parts, approval, the more likely they're going to be taking those extra breaks because, heck, efficiency isn't important around here. We really need to be aware of it. Anytime those techs aren't wrenching, the entire dealership is losing money. So important for us to put our focus on what we can do to make their life easier so all they have to concentrate on is turning those wrenches and getting efficiency. Now, before I turn you loose, a few golden nuggets for you to fill in your book. Quick, positive shop meetings are so critically important. Getting the entire team together, but not to have a complaint session. Just to constructively say, hey, here's what's going on. I like these things to be 5-10 minutes at the most. And if someone's complaining in the meeting, just give them a 3x5 card or say, here's how I want you to respond. If you've got an issue, do it this way. Another way that can help in keeping them focused is to have an agenda. To say, hey, here's what we're going to talk about. Quick and positive. The next, track efficiency and it will go up. This dry erase board was in one of the shops that I visited, and I loved it. It was basically just a snapshot of how much the techs are working and how much they were able to bill. Another one of the stores I went to just had sidewalk chalk, and on the floor where the techs would walk in every day, they would write as a whole, here's how much we paid you guys for total for the whole shop, and here's how much we were able to bill so far. The more you track it, the more it's going to go up. The next is utilize that 80-20 rule. Visual service sales tools will help you sell more and build more loyalty with your customers. They are a win-win. They make our life a whole lot easier. By the way, I love these new service boards that I'm seeing in more of our stores. The next one, keep an eye on your open repair order list. Hopefully you've got a dealer management software system that allows you to just print it off and you don't have to handwrite it like this one here, but even if you have to do it by hand, it's worth it. When you see the parts truck come in and deliver parts, wouldn't it be nice to be able to go check on everything that you're missing parts for instead of one at a time? Think back to that Fitbit guy. Minimize your steps. Tracking and keeping an eye on that open RO list, make sure that we don't lose any tickets, that everyone is staying communicated with, that we know we've got those callback times set and honored. The next one we mentioned was to consider giving sales a block of time to manage themselves. And some of the stores that do that, give it to them in sort of a green, yellow, red. Hey, when you get to the yellow, when you've got this much schedule, let us know so we can maybe dial back and give you a little bit more time. But don't make it a habit of squeezing in deals because it winds up squeezing out profitability, employee satisfaction, and customer satisfaction. Keep and use a rainy day list. When you're closing out a ticket, be looking at it. What additional work do we need to capture? Maybe you stick it on line 1 of the work order. Maybe you put it on a spreadsheet. Any way at all that you're going to track that so that you can circle that work back into the dealership. Think about it. We've already diagnosed it. We probably already have a parts list. We've done everything but actually do the work and get paid off of it. If we can keep you a little busier in your slower weeks or months, that's going to really help you out in your busier weeks and months and make sure that our customers are happier with their product overall. The stores that use rainy day lists have so much better CSI and profitability. This next one's huge. This has actually taken some of our shops from being not profitable to profitable by doing just one thing. Pre-pull parts and stage jobs proactively every night before you leave work. One of my stores that was doing this successfully has added an extra step. They said every night before our technicians and our detail guys leave, they have to go and physically touch the unit they're going to be working on in the morning. They said this has brought us so much success with them not only finding where those units are, but also maybe letting us know ahead of time the night before if there's any issues with working on that unit. In your handout, there's a great tool called Jumpstart Shop Performance. One of your homework assignments is to go through it and put a check mark next to the items that you should consider to help your shop get to the next level. Your role every single day is vital to the shop's success in growing profitability, in improving and taking down those walls of communication with your coworkers, in building customer satisfaction and loyalty, and really in just making your job more enjoyable. So think about what we've talked about that you want to take back to your shop and apply. In your handout, there are some additional bonus content items, including 10 things that should be on every work order, customer service and parts, 10 things that keep techs from turning wrenches, and a master golden nugget list of some of my favorite best practices from service. Join us for the rest of the series if you liked this one. We've got 3 more sessions coming your way this year. The Master Service and Parts Advisor will be next. Then we'll talk about customer loyalty and selling skills. And lastly, continuous improvement. Thank you so much, RV professionals. From my family to yours, we really appreciate what you're doing out there and wish you a fantastic year. Get to it.